Hi. Chapter 8.8 is called Factor by Grouping. I think we'll do this in two videos. The first thing I want you to know is that factor by grouping is something you're going to hear throughout high school. It's a common process that will keep getting repeated in various ways. So factor by grouping is a terminology that I'd like you to know. So here we have a quadratic where a is not equal to 1, a is equal to 8. And so we're going to have to factor this. So I'm going to show you splitting the middle term as the process, which becomes a situation of factor by grouping. So the first thing we have to do here, you have to notice that we have a greatest common factor, so a GCF of 4. 4 goes into all these. 8 does not go into 36 or 20, but 4 goes into all these. So we first take a 4 out. 4x squared minus, let's see, 9x minus 5. Okay. We still have, oh, this isn't 4. This should be 2x squared, right? It should be 2x squared. Okay. So we still have a is not equal to 1. We have a is equal to 2. So we have a little more complicated situation than if we could just guess and check, although we probably could guess. But what we're going to do is we're going to split the middle term. So the first term, oh my God, this is also a 2. 2x squared. This is supposed to be 2x squared. That's a mess. Sorry about that. 2x squared. The last term is going to be negative 5. And we have to split this negative 9x into two things, into two different things, two x terms, so that they multiply to negative 10. All right, so they multiply to negative 10. So we need their value to be a total of negative 9x. So let's see, it seems like 10 and 1. So 10x and 1x. And in order to get this negative sign, we're going to have negative 10 and positive x. So negative 10 plus x is still equal to 9x, or negative 9x rather. Okay, now here is the factor by grouping that's going to happen. Factor by grouping means we're going to factor the first two things and then factor the last two things. So we're grouping this 4-term polynomial into two groups. And we take the greatest common factor out of each group. So the greatest common factor here is 2x. So we still have a 4 over here. I'll write that in a minute. And 2x. Now 2x times x minus 5 is this particular little section. We still have a 4 out here. All right. And let's see. Then here we have to take a greatest common factor out of the second two terms. Well, there is no greatest common factor. So we just take a greatest common factor out of 1 times x minus 5. Now, the key thing with factor by grouping is when we factor these two things, we need to come out with a greatest common factor between these two terms that we wind up with. This being one term and this being a second term. So what we have here is x minus 5 times 2x. And here we have x minus 5 times 1. So we have x minus 5 as a common factor now between these two sets. All right, so what we do is we take a 4, because we already had that. We multiply that by x minus 5. And we undistribute the x minus 5. So the x minus 5 was first multiplied by 2x, and then it was multiplied by plus 1. Right? And that's the factor by grouping part from here to here. We've taken this 4-term polynomial, we've grouped the two pieces at the beginning, we've grouped the two pieces at the end, and we've taken the greatest common factor out of each of those to pull out the greatest common factor, and thus we have factored this 4-term polynomial. I'm going to come back to you with a second video on factoring something else where we also use factor by grouping to do the process. So factor by grouping is a terminology you need to know, as well as a process you need to know.